These quality times contribute significantly to our overall happiness. They're an indirect way of pursuing happiness. They are like looking at the colors of the rainbow.
My name is Nick Hutchison of Book Thinkers.
Hi, this is Dr. Oz Garcia.
This is John Lee.
My name is Dr. Wendy Suzuki.
Hey, this is Richard Dolan.
This is Jason Pfeiffer.
This is Todd Herman.
My name is Georgia Clare.
This is Nir Ayal.
My name is Chris Bailey.
And this podcast
makes sense. And the idea of achieving happiness, as if it was a goal would be, that would be some form of self-actualization that perhaps never has been achieved, but, humans, we're always going to aspire. You said you were talking about Carl Jung and what he said. I have something like that because I'm very big on helping people as an action step, just take an inventory of what they're consuming, not just food, consuming within their days. And God, right now, if you're caught up in the consumption of what's going on in the world right now, I wouldn't assume on the other side you're feeling happier. But I always say what we consume, we assume. So that's one of the training tools. And I'll just say, you were talking about the R for relationships. And I just want to also acknowledge that, even though you and I don't know each other that well outside of this conversation, that R is taking place right now because it's a good conversation and it's enriching. And, my goal that I set for this podcast selfishly to be happier by the end, I can say that I'm feeling better, less tension and increased happiness there. And you were the first person, I had heard about this before, but I just didn't really take, but this idea of how people, if they're open and curious, which is something that I teach people how to do all the time, but I've never, it was more of a communication tool and a way of not getting distracted in life. But I think it was an MIT study that came out with that, I'm pretty sure. But that idea of people that are open and curious living longer. So I started after that saying, and by the way, there's a research that shows that you'll actually live longer if you're into that sort of thing. Were you going to say something?
Yeah. So first of all, the what we consume, we assume, that's your line.
Oh, I mean, as far as I know, but you know how the brain works. But it's in my book as if it's mine, but I'm just waiting for someone to say you indirectly got that from me.
Well, I'm gonna quote you on that with your permission. It's a very, very powerful idea, and it reminds me of the work of Eknath Iswaran. And Eknath Iswaran is a fascinating individual. He was a student of Gandhi, and I believe it was in the 1950s, that he left for the United States on a Fulbright scholarship. Later became a professor of English at Berkeley. And he was, as far as I know, the first professor to teach in the West a full class on meditation.
Wow.
One of his most important contributions is in his book, which I highly, highly recommend, called Passage Meditation. And he talks there about how one form of meditation has to do with reading or repeating, if you can memorize it, a passage. And it could be a religious passage or a spiritual passage or your favorite passage from Harry Potter. It doesn't matter, but something that is very meaningful to you. And what he says is that when you repeat it deliberately, slowly, mindfully, over and over again, it has long-term impact. Again, because of the neural pathways that are created. And his line is, we become what we meditate on, which is a very similar idea to what we consume, we assume.
It's funny that you bring that up. What we become. So I've been meditating for years and years and years every day. It's one of those things that no matter what, I don't not do. I never skip that. And you just made me realize what I love so much about meditation is because when I'm meditating, I'm really, after all, thinking about nothing, which is what I love about it. So that's a very Buddhist thing, to become nothing. I love
emptiness.
It. Yes. Yeah, emptiness, the middle way. Thank you so much for that. And recently, I don't know if you know Dr. Wendy Suzuki. She's the dean at NYU, just a spectacularly intelligent woman. And she speaks a lot about the benefits of exercise in brain health. And, she has done all the research on the fact that, even just a 10-minute walk, or increasing exercise gives what she calls a neurochemical bubble bath to your brain. And well, what's cool about that is you can ask anybody, no matter how much they complain about exercise, how they feel after, and they'll probably validate that they feel happier. And she breaks that down to a science. So you'll love that. And I'm going to send you a copy of my book where you'll learn more about the consume and assume thing. So I want to, we've touched on it a little bit, but I think it's one thing that is everybody holds in common in the entire world, which is why I like to take a stance for the human race, which is what I wish everybody would do rather than just our culture. But we're all human. So I want to talk about this idea of this permission to be human. And my observation is that there's this enormous cultural pressure, out there to stay positive and optimistic at all times. So much pressure associated with being happy, which is probably like looking in the sun. And a lot of people call that toxic positivity. Like if you're an optimist, God, the last thing that you want to do is run into a group of pessimists. They're going to hate you. So my question is, why is suppressing difficult emotions actually harmful to our well-being? Because there's a lot of books that teach you how to do that and let go of the past and all of that stuff. And you're giving people permission to being human. And I love that.
Yeah. So if I had to summarize the my work in one sentence, it would be learn about and then follow nature.
Right.
Learn about and then follow nature. Or as Francis Bacon, the father of modern science, said 400 or more years ago, he said, nature to be commanded must be obeyed. We need to understand our nature. So for instance, our nature requires that we, drink water. If we don't drink water, we die. Our nature demands that we breathe. If we don't, we die. Now, our nature also demands certain things on a psychological level. And if we do not consume them, then we don't necessarily die, but we don't live fully. And one of the things that our nature dictates is that we experience painful emotions. Literally from the second we die, a baby cries, they're not crying of joy. Oh, I was born into this amazing world. They cry because they're hurt. And it's natural to express these emotions. No baby would say, okay, to make my mother happy now, I'm going to stop crying. No, they cry. It's part of our nature to express painful emotions when these arise. And yet we get to the age of 3 or 4 and we're told by, again, whether it's a parent or a teacher or the ether, we're told, be strong, don't cry. What's wrong? Why are you sad?
Yeah.
And through that, painful emotions gain a negative reputation to the point where they're called negative emotions, which is a problem in and of itself. There are no negative or positive emotions. There are painful and pleasurable emotions. And when we reject part of our nature, we pay a price for it. There is a coup. And these painful emotions rise up and they say, you don't give us space, we'll take even more space. What you resist persists. Instead of observing them, I love this phrase from the book by Mark Williams, who's a professor at Oxford, called The Mindful Way Through Depression. And he talks about looking at these painful emotions or the painful part of the body that's associated with the painful emotion, whether it's the constricted throat or the pain in the belly or the tight shoulders. He said we need to observe these painful experiences with friendly curiosity. I love that phrase, friendly curiosity. And when we learn to do that, we realize, and again, this is very much a Buddhist teaching, and it's a modern positive psychology teaching. When we learn to observe these emotions with friendly curiosity, they just leave as they came. There's a beautiful poem by Rumi, again, 800 years ago or so, called The Guest House, which talks about how we need to embrace all these, painful emotions, all these seeming intruders. We need to invite them in as guests, as if they're envoys, messengers from the beyond. It's a lovely image.
I love that. Good. And, that's why grandparents love children so much, because it's temporary. Just like a guest, it's temporary. Alan Watts, I'm just a big fan of Alan Watts stuff. And he always talks about, these thoughts, feelings, and emotions, not as things that, we would be worried that show up. The Buddhist would always just say thinking, say, yeah, my heart beats. I don't question that, and my brain thinks. But Alan Watts likes to refer to our thoughts as clouds that just pass on by, if you even give them a chance. I have this fun concept that I share with people. I love to look at how we're similar rather than different. And I think that's a big part of this, because, just the idea of not having a good time, you're somehow assimilate that you're different than everybody else. But I say that we're all the same in the sense that we all want the same three things in life. I say we all want to be happier. There's your thing. Healthier and wealthier. And I always challenge the audience, big audience. I say, please stand up, raise your hand if you would like to be unhappy today. Did you set a goal? Does anybody here want to get unhealthy or make less money? And everybody laughs. So I refer to all of humanity as being seekers of the Isn't that fun?
Lovely. Lovely.
So I want to just ask you, I love this stuff on anti-fragility, and I know that this is something that somebody else came up with, but it's so perfect for what you talk about, as well as, its close relation to this concept of, rather than PTSD, post-traumatic growth. Oh God. There's so much stoic stuff involved in that, but I've never heard it that way. I just love, PTG. Could you just talk a little bit about this idea of becoming anti-fragile and also embracing post-traumatic growth?
Yeah, JC, when I ask students whether they are psychology majors or whether they are, C-suite managers in an organization, I ask them, so how many of you have heard of the term PTSD?
Yeah.
And just about everyone puts their hand up. Yeah, they've heard of post-traumatic stress disorder. They've read about it. If they're psych students, they've studied research on it. And then I ask them a second question, and I say, now, who of you has heard, put your hand up if you've heard of PTG. And hardly anyone puts their hand up. PTG stands for, as you mentioned, post-traumatic growth. Now, here is the thing, and this is based on research by Tedeschi, Calhoun, and many others subsequently. We are twice as likely to experience post-traumatic growth than post-traumatic stress disorder. In other words, we're twice as likely to grow following a trauma than to break down following a trauma. The problem is that most people have never heard of post-traumatic growth. And it turns out that just knowing about the possibility of growth following a trauma significantly increases the likelihood thereof.
That's right.
In other words, just knowing that post-traumatic growth is possible makes it more likely to happen. Not to mention the fact that there are certain things that we can do that will increase the likelihood of growing following a trauma or any difficult experience for that matter. What are these things? Identical, not similar, identical to the SPIRE elements. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I did not invent SPIRE. All I did was put it together in an acronym. And the SPIRE elements, whether it's meditating, will make us more resilient and better able to grow from hardship. Whether it's physical exercise, it turns out that physical exercise doesn't just make us physically tougher, it makes us psychologically tougher. It turns out that relationships are not just the number one predictor of happiness. They're also the number one generator of growth following hardship, even trauma. So all these elements that we cultivate, hopefully on a day-to-day basis, don't just increase our levels of well-being, they also better prepare us to deal with difficulties, with challenges, with hardships. And again, this is, to my mind, perhaps the most important message
Yeah.
of the field of positive psychology. Positive psychology, the science of happiness, is not just for good times. It's as relevant, if not more relevant, for difficult times. Why? Because it makes us more resilient, because it helps us grow from hardship. Now, just one more thing, lest I be misunderstood. I'm not glorifying trauma. I'm not glorifying hardship or difficulties. Traumas are traumatic, difficult and challenging experiences are difficult and challenging, but they happen. We don't invite them into our lives. When they happen, the question is, what do we do about it? I don't know if you did as a child, but I constantly heard the phrase, things happen for the best.
Yep.
And whether it's as a child or as an adult, I never fully connected to that. What do you mean things happen for the best? COVID for the best? Thousands of people dying? Wars for the best? Someone gets, sick for the best? I don't think so. But while things do not necessarily happen for the best, we can choose to make the best of things that happen. While things don't necessarily happen for the best, we can choose to make the best of things that happen. You talked earlier about toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is, it's for the best. Embrace it, love it. Amore fate, whatever happens, it's great. No, it's not. But making the best of things that happen, rather than toxic positivity, that's grounded positivity.
I love that. I get challenged quite a bit about my philosophies, especially when I say something that's true that nobody wants to believe. And my hat, I don't know if you try to figure it out, but it's a sound I teach people to say. It's a practice in cognitive distancing, where whenever somebody says something, I think a very healthy answer is to just say, but what it stands for is haven't made up my mind. So I always like to tell people that I haven't made up my mind about anything yet, and I don't plan to. And that's because I seek growth and expansion, and I'm in this process of happiness and I want to get happier. But if you really want to play with that, then you'd have to acknowledge that one of the old sayings that everybody frowns upon is extremely true. I don't think that I'm complaining when I say that life sucks and then you die. What I'm saying is that for the most part, I don't know about anybody else, but I would say that if I looked at my lifeline, I'm 54, I would say most of it was sucky and hard and difficult, but we typically just look at the shining moments. If you were to take a line from left to right, birth to death, and phase place yourself and put a little piece of tape over the shining moments in your life, you'd probably look at breakthroughs or anything. But if you can't learn how to dance in the rain, well, how could you have an extraordinary life? So I love this idea of being human, because if you don't acknowledge that and embrace it, as sucky as it is, I think the downside of that is you don't really get to live a great life, which is my end goal. I just want to, if the day's my last day, I want to enjoy it around the things that matter most.
I absolutely agree with that. And I would say that the most important thing in life, and I'm saying this as a psychologist, the most important thing in life is not how you feel, it's what you do.
Yeah, sure.
And, many of my students ask me, so what should I study? And I said, pursue your passions, follow your bliss, the usual cliches that are true.
Sure.
However, if I was going back now, to my 20s, and I'm turns out I'm a year older than you are.
Thank
if I
God.
was going back to my 20s now, I would study acceptance and commitment therapy. Why? Because acceptance and commitment therapy captures just what you were talking about. There are difficulties, hardships. Very often life sucks and we experience painful emotions. So what? Yeah. It doesn't mean that I cannot act based on my values, on the things that are important to me. And then evaluate, assess my life as worthy. And yes, sometimes I'll feel great about it. And, when I arrive at certain points, I'll rejoice. And then when I'll be immersed in certain activities, I'll enjoy peak performance and peak experience. And that's wonderful. And I will struggle. And I will have days when I'm exhausted and don't feel like getting out of bed in the morning. So what? That doesn't mean I can't get out of bed in the morning and do what I believe is important and worthy and significant. What we do matters more than how we feel. And when we understand that, we'll actually feel better. And when we understand that, more importantly, we'll actually do better.
I think you might have just come up with a great next step book for Mel Robbins. She did Letnam, and now she could write a book called So What? So What? It sounds perfect for her. I want to talk a little bit. We're kind of coming to the end of this, which I'm not happy about. So, there's a whole discussion about that, all good things end. But I want to talk a little bit about something that a lot of people face with, and that's the distraction problem. So we live in this world where, attention is, I always tell people that you need to acknowledge how valuable the asset of attention is, because everybody's vying for it. But we live in a world where attention is constantly fragmented more than ever. And it looks like it's happening. I mean, everybody's worried about AI, like it's going to take over. I'm worried about something else. It's like it's doing the thinking for us very much, and we're just involved in this endless content. You once used an analogy of two beautiful songs. I loved this, and I want my listeners to hear this. I just got the chills thinking about it. Sometimes stuff in your book gives people the chills. It was an analogy of two beautiful songs playing at the same time, and I don't want to give up the rest, but is distraction quietly eroding our ability to experience happiness?
Very much so. So Daniel Goleman calls our age the age of distraction. And that exacts a very high price. And what we need to do is move away from multitasking and towards single tasking, because multitasking is one of the major enemies of happiness, of whole being. And the example that you refer to, so my favorite song is Whitney Houston's "And I Will Always Love You."
Yeah.
And if I were to listen to it and rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, my experience would be, of course, a 10. My second most favorite music piece is Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Pa 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 pam.
Yep.
And when I listen to it, I feel like everything is possible and everything is beautiful. And my experience of it is, if I had to rate on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe not quite a 10. It's not Whitney Houston, but a 9.5. And then imagine this: I want more. It's not enough, the Whitney Houston. It's not enough, Beethoven. I want it all. And I play these two pieces together. And what do I get? A 19.5? No, not a 10, not even a 5. It's cacophony. It's noise. And that's modern life for you.
Yeah.
Trying to fit more and more into less and less is counterproductive. In other words, the quality of our experience is very often determined by the quantity of experiences. And we need to simplify, to do less rather than more. Yes, of course, we can enjoy a beautiful piece of music. We cannot enjoy two beautiful pieces of music simultaneously. And it's an important lesson for life in general. Single tasking over multitasking. Maybe not all the time, not possible, not realistic, but more of the time.
Yeah. So everybody understands the idea of training. You go to the gym to train, and you train in school and all of that stuff. But in our house, we promote doing what we call boredom reps. And well, I mean, if in this distractive world, and that's not mine, I can't tell you where I got it. I heard it from somebody, but we're just increasingly moving further and further away from the ability to just be bored. And there's a lot of value in being bored. And I had a guy on my show, or actually I was on his show, and this is a guy that reads, like as much as Jim Quick. I mean, his whole nature. Actually, I want to introduce you to him at some point. This is a guy that promotes people's books. So he reads books. And he was telling me from a place of, being pretty proud of himself, that even when he goes in the shower, he has a speaker and he listens to audiobooks. And I just kind of challenged him, and his name is Nick Hutchinson. And what he did in response was spectacular. I just challenged him. I said, Do you ever allow yourself to just be bored? And that was the first time that he acknowledged that he didn't. So he goes and he films a video and posts it. And he's got a very big following of him going in his shower and throwing his speaker out in my name. But I love that. Yeah. So boredom is a big one.
Is a big one, Jesse. I want to say something about that.
Yeah.
So I have one of my closest friends. Her name is Shirley Yuval Yair, and she's a child psychologist.
Mm.
And she doesn't let her children go, online all the time whenever they're bored. And they would say to her sometimes, "Mommy, I'm bored," and her response is always the same: "That's okay, sweetheart. Just be bored with dignity."
That's great.
Yeah. And
a lot of value in boredom. And also there's a great book called Intentional by Chris Bailey. That's why I'm so blessed to be able to have people like you and all these people on my show. And he just talks about the value of allowing your mind to wander. And there's another thing that we were told not to do. So I want to ask you, kind of a closing question. And I guess it would be a little bit of a personal question, just because not personal, but something that is going to ask you what you do in these situations. But when you wake up on a day, this is what I think most people are going to be like, yeah, but everybody likes to bring their butt into the equation. But when you wake up on a day when you don't feel particularly motivated, when maybe it's a little bit more difficult to do, remember the spire and the rainbow, what is it that you personally do? And I'm not insinuating that you would do something different on a day like that. Maybe that's how you would justify it. But what do you do on the mornings when you wake up and, your computer boots up and things are not looking good?
Yeah. So first of all, you brought up Mel Robbins. I'm a big believer in the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 action approach. So the night before, when I go to bed, I know what I'm going to do the next day. Remember, I spoke about how long-term goals liberate us. So I know that I'm going to, be sitting down by, my computer, or I'm going to be teaching, or whatever it is, and I do it. So that's most important. However, when things are really in dire straits, and again, I had this experience just over the few days ago. There's war going on in the world. Sure. It's affecting me just like it's affecting so many people, even if we are not in the war zone and cannot compare our experiences to those who are. And it was very difficult for me to motivate myself, to get myself moving. So what I did is I reversed my day. Specifically, my best times to write are the mornings. So, I do my morning meditation, and I move for a few minutes, to get the blood flowing, and then I sit down on this chair in front of this computer and write. I felt like I couldn't do that. I was not in the mood, and I was distracted. So I exercised, and I went into the gym and lifted my weights and did my high intensity interval training, and then it was easier, not easy, but easier for me to sit down and actually write. So, I call physical exercise the wonder drug. I didn't make this name up, but the wonder drug of psychological interventions. So I simply took that wonder drug earlier during the day.
Yeah, and I think the message there is, we're so trained to, be in these situations where we can say, well, that's great, but and then everybody will justify their situation and say, people love to justify why they can't be happy. It's an interesting phenomenon.
And again, JC, one of the ways to deal with unhappiness is, to write in your journal or shed tears.
Yeah.
These are all ways of giving ourselves the permission to be human, to literally welcome these painful emotions, internalize them, and then they do not overstay their welcome. And if they do, so they do. So we accept that as well.
That's beautiful. Well, God, I would say that this is one for the vault. You did great in the Dragon's Lair. I have so many more questions. I'm hoping maybe we can do a part 2 to this one day. But I guess I would say, what are you excited about sharing with people right now? How would people, best follow you? But also, what is it that you'd really love them to know about?
Yeah. So, I've over the years created a number of programs that I love, and when I created them, I thought I'd be teaching for the next 3, 4 years and then move on. But I've been teaching them for the past, 10 years, and I get excited by every new program. And it's a certificate in happiness studies, and we have a master's of degree in happiness studies, and as I mentioned earlier, also a PhD. So these are things that, again, this is what takes up my everyday. This is what excites me, and what I hope to continue to share with the world.
I'm just imagining, and dare I say that the typical American saying, "Is there any money in happiness?"
There is a lot of the ultimate currency in
Exactly.
happiness, and happiness is the ultimate currency. And one thing that I emphasize to my students, the key is, if you can, to do good and to do well. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I would just close and say, there's certain people that have an easier or more capability of seeing the colors of the rainbow versus others, and that would just be probably those possibility thinkers and people that maybe haven't made their mind up about anything yet. So I think there's a lot of wonderful takeaways, and I'm just very, very honored that you spent some time here. I'm more fascinated with you as a person now that I've actually met you, and thank you so much for spending this time with us. And I'm definitely going to try to cycle you back into this flow because I didn't get to 50% of my questions.
Thank you, JC. I very much enjoyed it, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
So one closing reflection. Tal, one of the things that stands out to me from this conversation is that happiness may not be something that we pursue directly. It's actually something that emerges when the conditions of our lives are all aligned. Meaning, connection, growth, attention, permission to be human. Those were some big takeaways. You can't chase the rainbow, but you can create the conditions where it becomes visible. And maybe, just maybe, that's the deeper lesson here. In a world that constantly pushes us to optimize, improve, and perform happiness, the real secret might be learning how to fully engage with the imperfect, messy, beautiful human experience of life itself. Tal, I want to personally thank you for sharing your insights with us today, and thanks again for being here.
My name is Tal Ben-Chahar, and this podcast made me happier.
Do me a favor, hit subscribe and like the video if you're vibing with this. It helps us reach more people who need to hear this message. Share this with a friend and comment with a topic that you might want to hear in future episodes. I want to make sure that we're talking about things that matter most to you.
Makes sense.